Welcome, everybody. This is Kristine again from Mom Vegan Love, and I am beyond excited today. I get to have a conversation. We get to have a conversation with the beautiful Debs today. Welcome.
Hello, Kristine. I'm also quite blissed out actually at our connection, what we're here for, what we're up to. And I extend my heart and my love to everybody whose heart we're going to touch today. So thank you for creating.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's such a gift. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Start at the top, the basics. I'm a 66-year-old English woman who has spent the last 30-something years in the worlds of personal, business, and spiritual development. And they all came into one beautiful sort of river, these three streams, something about 7 years ago, when I was shown very clearly, I mean, a really clear dream, that my particular set of gifts, physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual, were to be synthesized and brought forward for midlife women who are in their perimenopausal and going up to menopausal time. That's me, really. I love dancing, horses, yoga, being outside. I say, left to my own devices, if I wasn't following my divine's direction, I'd be in a field, up a tree, reading, with my elf costume on and playing with my ponies. But that's my personality. But my absolute divine joy and bliss is genuinely to know that I'm adding something to the great tapestry of the networks of support that are emerging across the globe to support humanity in its evolution.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And I love that you love to play. I think it's so important.
It is.
Yeah, we get to do that. We get to have fun. Life is supposed to feel good, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Oh, well, today we're going to talk a little bit about addictions. What do you think are some of the main reasons for addiction?
I think it for me, it comes down to something quite simple. It's not knowing how to resource yourself
Mm.
in a nourishing way, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And the main reasons, I suppose, we can look at a whole complex network of broken connections and dysfunctional ways of being. I feel that very strongly, that cause us quite naturally, in a way, to seek other forms that will give us a modicum of that which we sort of biochemically recognize, I think, at a below primal level that we need. There's somewhere we want to feel that we are being, and that's innate. And even though it gets lost sometimes under the welter of everything else, I don't think we'd even start on that path if we didn't think we should feel other than we do, right?
Mm. Oh my goodness. This is all just like one thing after the next. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I love that. It's like we know that we're supposed to feel good, but we don't know how. So we're almost getting tricked a little bit. And I was talking about that earlier today with the like mommy wine culture and how we're just almost misled into thinking that that will be our treat. That is how we align. That's how we like enjoy life. But then really what we're drinking is actually poison.
And, in Tantra, we talk about poison, and when is something poisonous? And, what I've said, I hope doesn't trivialize anybody's experience. And, I've come from a family with addictions, but what I'm saying is that almost everything else leads us to believe that it's it's something outside of ourselves that is causal. And in a sense, it becomes that, but we try to fix problem A problem B? And we're like trying to point a finger at the cause and the solution. And yet I think the cause at once is bigger, which isn't a great way of describing it, but actually more easily approachable than we believe.
Can you speak more about that?
Well, I remember somebody saying to me when I first started studying practical metaphysics that somebody who likes to drink spirits, for example, like my dad did, is seeking a connection with their spirit. That might seem a
Oh,
bit crass, it might seem a bit simplistic, and I'm very careful of kind of, what was the new age woo-woo throwaway sayings. But there's something in that because, when he was at his most approachable and happiest, he was well topped up with spirit. But that was his main avenue to do that. The addictions that were under the water, and I think these are the ones I like to talk about, were much less visible. Coming from what I would now term as a middle-class English family, there are things that you can do that are acceptable because in a sense, they're the face that you can present. And then there are the addictions that are hard to name and are masked very often, by the use of some external thing. So what am I saying there? He was addicted to what had become his familiar pain. He was addicted to being a person who, because that was the biochemical life that felt comfortable. And it was only when I began to realize that I'd misidentified safety as being at home, when actually I wasn't safe at home, that I had some like tiny wedge into this fog that I was living in. It was like, why did I feel safe at home when it wasn't safe? Because the environment was very familiar. So he was addicted to his stories, his pain, his story about his mother not loving him, highly unlikely. I knew my grandma, just a bunch of stuff. But you couldn't challenge those.
right.
Not then, not in the 60s and 70s. Now we would find some pathway to do that. And therefore, even if we had challenged his alcoholism and tried to get him off, back then, and with an ego that's determined to hide from what's hurt, what could disrupt it, as I tried to once, was to gently disrupt it. I just opened a can of worms, a torrent of rage. So I think it's the secret private addictions, the ones that we can't even see in ourselves in a way, that even get hidden under the more public ones that we can name and send somebody to get fixed.
Wow. Yeah, just so many things come up, right? There's just, what I'm hearing is that number one, we have to be willing to look inside to see where my computer says that it doesn't have any. Oh, excuse me for a
Come on,
little
computer.
moment. I need to plug my computer in.
Eee!
I'm going to sing a little song while I do that.
What? Any particular song? Do you want me to hum and keep everybody entertained? Guys,
Yeah.
if you're watching what I'm not going to sing. It's not pretty.
Oh my goodness, that's life. So problem fixed. But isn't that funny though? I needed to. That is actually kind of takes me down a different trail. Just like how our body just gives us little symptoms like this, little signs that, oh my God, we're running low on energy. And what do we do about that? Well, we probably go find it in different places and sometimes in the wrong places because of habits and because we may not want to look at why is the battery low. There's just so many tears. I really hear everything you're saying. And I think the first step for any just falling in love with yourself is the willingness to look inside, and it's scary. It's really scary to go back there and just see, why am I this way? Of course, if you come in and try to take the pacifier away from my baby, they're gonna scream, but it's not really the pacifier is the soothing, right? That is just the symptom, just the object. So if you come and try to take the drink, the spirit away from your dad, he'll act just like that little toddler, right? Because we have to make that change ourselves, that decision inside ourselves, and being like, no, this has served, thank you. This has served a purpose, and now I no longer need this, and I'm willing to grow. But there's
I hear you. I always say never kick away somebody's crutch unless you're absolutely certain they've got a framework and one foot in the new framework, before they start to relinquish things. Way back, when I first started, particularly in what's probably now called the healing industry, I'm even steering away from the word healing because it connotes something that I think is probably a bit misleading. But I realized that this is back in the 80s and the 90s. There were lots of people going around going, hey, I'm a shaman and I'm going to lay my hands. And it's not that this doesn't work, but some people have got it and some people haven't. And again, they were taking the power from people, thinking, if I just get rid of that, then I'm going to be fine. I can stop you smoking. I can stop you doing all these things. But actually what they were doing was taking away that person's refuge, the thing that was actually keeping them propped up in this physical mental world. So for me, like you, it always begins with studying carefully. We so rush to diagnose problems in our Western society, and we so rush to come in with our solution. But if nothing is an emergency right then, as you said, there are lots and lots of clues over time that help us to start to piece together the totality of why this individual never got plugged into source energy. Let's just call it that, because it's a fact. The universe is running on source energy and is having to spend a lot of time, money, effort finding other sources to replenish themselves.
Yeah. And also what I'm so present to as well is, like, in my case, realizing that maybe alcohol wasn't that connection to source and the answer to connection and love and community as I had thought. And then reaching out and looking up, like literally Googling, am I an alcoholic? And then getting the result being inconclusive. Like, no, you don't check all the boxes. You don't drink by yourself. You don't drink every day. So then I'm like, I guess I don't really have a problem. I don't really know where to turn. And that's where I feel like I'm writing this book for. Just the Unconventional Addict is the title of my book, and just helping people in that gap, knowing that you don't have to hit rock bottom with whatever addiction it is that you're having. You can and are allowed and get to seek help, but maybe in an untraditional way. And like just finding those different tools,
What you've said, and I know we've chatted about this before, so I'm not being disingenuous, but it really moves me because I'd say I was somewhere in that demographic where it doesn't look like you've got a problem. And if we come to a definition of problem, systems analysis says a problem is when something is happening that shouldn't or isn't happening that should. I use that a lot because sometimes people tell a story, but they're not really defining the problem. And using that as a framework, you knew something was happening that shouldn't and something wasn't happening that should. And many of us fall into you called it the gap, the gray area, where you're doing okay. And you're not damaged, ill, struggling enough. So why do we rely on systems that wait till we're devastatingly broken?
Yes. And are we as selfish when we're reaching out for help when there's people that are more in need,
And yet we're preempting something bigger. It's like like, I don't know about you, but I go to a naturopath, a kinesiologist, and she'll say, oh, that would have come out in a couple of years. And you listened to the prompt inside. You really held that. You really said, actually, I don't think it is okay for me to be doing this, no matter how it's normalized in other groups. And people would have said to you, oh, Kristine, come on, have a drink. You're making too much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Your body and the sensations in your body were talking to you. I mean, just tell me though, Chris, where did you go with that? What was next?
Mm. There was just so much shame around it too. But like when I quit, I did it in silence. The first 5 years of my sobriety, I did it alone. I didn't tell anybody. Fortunately, the universe helped me with a gift, the gift of pregnancy, and under that, excuse to not drink in public, people don't really question it, you know. But then when after my youngest daughter was born, then I could use this other excuse that she was highly sensitive, and the way I had been drinking in the past with my older two children, they didn't mind. They noticed, but dad was okay to play with dad instead. So I could spend that day in bed just nursing my hangover, But little Edna, my fiery, little just loving leech, she could not spend that much time away from me. So I knew that. So such a gift from the universe. So the time for me to build up the courage just added on to reach out and to just get connection and see. And also this gave me the gift of spending this time socializing without this pacifier or wall that a drink can be. So that is my story. But I feel like I tried to reach out many times before then, and I'm just so grateful that I got this time. It's just, I spoke to somebody yesterday that hosts something called Sober Mom Squad. So now people can come. It's a Zoom, and it's free on every Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. They can come, step in like we are right now with video sound on, or they can choose a different name, don't have to have their camera on, and they can just listen to other people share. And I think that is such a beautiful gift, because if I would have had something like that, I mean, also with two children, going to a meeting involves, first of all, acknowledging that you have a problem, feeling that your problem's big enough to warrant going to the traditional meeting, getting a sitter, like basically maybe an hour before you go, then an hour of the meeting, then you have to get back. So like that's a lot.
A big deal.
Yeah. So I just love this new, this is kind of what I'm talking about. There's all these new little tools out there, and also more and more people coming out and talking about and lifting that veil of shame of alcohol, being the end all be all for everybody, and basically that if you don't drink it, you're like, well, I guess you're not an adult. You get to sit at the kids' table.
Boring.
Yeah, you're boring.
Yeah, I was told I was boring by my father. I was told somebody wouldn't buy me a bottle of water in a pub in a group of people. I'm not paying for water in a pub. The bigger, the picture we're talking about is so fascinating, isn't it? That we have a voice, we have a platform to say, no, it wasn't awful, but it was going somewhere I didn't like, and I didn't feel that it was totally wholesome and healthy for me. And yet, something I want to highlight is how many people around me, my parents, for example, told me I was wrong. I was boring. Oh, have a drink. You're making something of it. It won't hurt you. Words like that. And in fact, my mother had been kind of subsumed into my father's alcoholism, which very often happens. She was a non-drinking 17-year-old when she dated him. He was 10 years older. But of course, time marches on, and she got involved with his habits. And when we got social as a family, when I was old enough to go to the local, as we say in England, with them, that's probably when I started to get to know them a bit better in the pub. So everything hovered around that. And for me to want to step away from that, I got jibed, I got pain for it, And I know we've only spoken about alcohol, and I can't speak about too much else because chemically I smoked and I gave that up. I tried a variety of drugs at college, and I mean, it was like, no, this isn't it. I mean, don't know if it's worth telling you, but this is how different we all are. So I was given access to LSD, and being kind of naturally protective of my body, I sort of spat half of it out and had the other half. And I had quite the experience, but I remember thinking, this is escapism. That's what I remember thinking. I know all this stuff. I can see the moon doing its thing, and I can see, the elementals, but I'm not here to escape. I remember thinking that this is just another way. And it's like I was groping my way through all these tunnels of temptation to say, no, there's something more that I want, I'm here to connect to. And I guess that's, if I was to be talking to somebody else, it's like, don't dismiss that. Don't let other people in society tell you that there's something flawed or weak about you, because you're actually pushing back on what society keeps offering you as a substitute. Whatever it is that a woman feels has become an addiction or addictions, because they're usually, my hidden when I cleared up the physical ones, I started working on those when I was 18. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I then realized there were all the ones that no one could see at work or at play. There were the ways that I got into relationships, particularly with men, that suddenly I began to be very alert. Probably when I finished the drinking and smoking, that I was bonding with people who actually were quite scary in their own way, were sucking my energy. And my drama was, going in there to support whatever. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter. But I was like, wow, I didn't see that when I was drinking, because we were all pub buddies, And if you were grumpy in the morning, as you'll know, well, that was normal, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
it was
part
like
of the
pulling
bonding.
some, yeah. The barroom buddies disappeared, and suddenly, if I did attract a guy, I'd realize this feels bad, but I still don't know why I'm pulled.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I so get that. And just with a little bit I know about codependency, and for you growing up with a alcoholic father, not being able to, save him, I'm sure you were out there trying to save somebody.
Oh, full time on my white charger. I mean, I read a book. I think the first time I really twigged it, I was quite old. I was in my 30s, and I met this guy, and it was the same thing. I'm like, okay. And I remember thinking he's a real Peter Pan. And I found a book called The Peter Pan Syndrome. And then I went on to I think the AA published a book about children of alcoholics, adult children of alcoholics. And I went through that book, and you sort of go, because I was still working through my own public persona a little bit. It was like, that's me. All of those things are me. So the journey isn't, I think what I want to say here is, because the journey isn't always obvious to everybody else. I'm not very scarred looking. I sound together. Nobody ever saw me throwing up or dragging myself into work. Well, I think I did have to leave the office a couple of times to sleep off hangovers, but that was covered up. It's what's going on under the surface for a lot of people, those women that are sort of soldiering on. I know your heart's there, my heart's there, is saying it doesn't have to be awful for you to find people who will say to you, no, honey, you're right. This isn't the way for you to go. It's okay.
Yes, yes, yes. I hear all that. And what I'm so present to as well is how I was taught that the surface was so important. That's all that matters. What it looks like on the outside. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about problems. Smile, be kind, people pleaser in the room right here. Yeah.
And there's another thing. It's a disconnect because taboos are placed on it. And taboos to me when I look at that energetically, years ago, I looked at, if you like, the imprint of taboo on the human energy system. And I was like, no wonder they're so powerful, because the way I see it, I'm just saying the way I see it, not the way that it really might be, but they all settle on the center of a chakra, right?
Oh.
So what you can't say closes your throat down. What you can't feel closes your um, emotional body down, and your base chakra, your safety, you like just don't feel it. So then it becomes easier to skate in the world where your addictions exist and keep building a story about it's fine. I'm just, these are my friends. This is a great way to be. We've got enough money in the bank, all of that. But actually, there have been taboos placed there, and who knows how and where. But to tell someone, as my mother did, we never discuss money or sex or politics. You can't do that. And we certainly don't talk about drinking, because it's, we're nice middle class people. It's the whole kind of Mrs. Robinson thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, and if I do talk about them, somebody will be very angry with me. So in telling us what we can and can't talk about, that also disconnects us further from our own source connection, because now we're marooned at sea, and we can't even shout. We can't even speak about it. How awful is that? And what you're offering is places where people can go and speak about it without somebody having to label them and say, you're not bad enough. What do you think your problem is?
Oh, that is so beautiful. And I so get that image of just this ship alone at sea, that at some point, even if you would yell, there wouldn't be anybody there to hear. Like, I'm just being brought back to the little inner child in me who was, you know, traumatized very early on, and then trying to speak up about that and not being believed. And then you just like almost like recreate that story, almost like in a way as a protection. We almost seek out unavailable people, as you go through life. So then it just becomes your truth that I am alone. So no wonder I did the first 5 years of my sobriety by myself, because I really thought I was alone.
So good to know that you're not.
Yeah, no one is. And just I feel like I didn't feel like I could talk about my trauma for the longest time. So I would stuff it in, try to numb it, and I ran. I've moved so much in my life. Moved so much. I mean, I grew up in Sweden. I'm in Florida now, and this wasn't a direct flight. But it wasn't until I started doing this really like deep inner healing that I could see that no matter how far I ran, I would always bring myself with me, you know. And then we can also shift that conversation and just be kind of grateful because I get to see the world. I've been to so many amazing places. So if I can come from a place of gratitude and just seeing this like force that I have inside of me to, you know, protect myself or to help others, like that is almost like unstoppable. When I stop taking poison in the form of alcohol or food or cigarettes or bad relationships, codependent relationships, and just like stop that and just be like, I don't have to do that anymore.
And then the sweetness can start. No. The
Mm.
sweetness of our own natural being. The sweetness that's suppressed when somebody says to you, you don't have a problem. Who do you think you are? Why are you whining? What complain about?
Mm.
Wouldn't it help if we were able to do that rather than wait till people were so severely broken that we had to put in place these systems
Mm.
that hold them up? And yet there's so many people who do look at that. A friend of mine went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, quite rightly so. And he came back and he went, oh, there's far worse people than me there.
Mm.
No point in my going. He actually he was raised in a religion which is, you know, kind of well known for, I suppose, what do I want to say, a bit of martyrdom. And
Mm.
he's like, but there were far worse people than me. Like, and you know, the teachings for anyone who wants it. But he felt, I suppose there are many things he could have felt that I couldn't sit in his body and know that perhaps it was a shock to him. Perhaps he didn't want to associate himself. And I think there's another thing. And I'm going to speak as a girl raised in middle class Britain, as a woman who's raised in that. The middle class are great deniers, in my opinion. It was only recently when I'm in my 60s. So, you know, some of the concepts that the younger people talk about so clearly now, like date rape.
Mm.
We didn't know there was such a thing as date rape. I was date raped. I didn't know it was date raped.
Mm.
I was somebody who had sex with me before I was legally able, a grown man, but he was a friend of a friend. So it's like, we can't say anything, can you? It'd be rude. There's a sort of middle class cover up that prevents, and where it spreads, I know not. And I'm not saying that it's certainly exclusive to that. Just talking about how I've looked back on my life and gone, God, how was that ever normalized?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Don't rock the boat. Did it really happen? Why do you want to ruin his life? Mm.
Could we, without pushing the word addiction to its limits, because that's, difficult water in a way, but could we say there is a strong tendency to hold on to delusion, secrecy, and superficiality that gets in the way of genuine connection and the potential to have conversations where we uncover things sooner
Mm.
as you are propagating. You're having conversations all over the place to say to people, this is genuine.
Mm.
Your need is genuine. And it might have been normalized in your life or your society, but it doesn't make it right or healthy.
Yeah. You don't have to suffer anymore. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's all about, that speaking out to, like the whole Me Too movement is so beautiful. There's people coming out. If they can step into the light, so can I. And I felt when I started talking about, what happened to me, there were so many people that came up and said, me too. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. I believe you. I believe you. And just being able to hear that, I was able to just like let go all of those layers of shame and thinking that, had it really happened, like it was just um almost like gaslighting, like
Yeah.
manipulation. Just being able to be like, yes, I'm so sorry, I believe you. And no matter what that is, and there's such a big scale too, but anything that hurts somebody's feelings or bodies, and just being able to like look them in the eye and saying, I'm so sorry that happened to you, I believe you, how can I help you,
It's one
like.
of the most wonderful feelings ever, to have somebody say, I see that and you didn't deserve it.
Mhm.
And you're right to feel the way you do. It's okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. And here's a completely different thought, but it was just something that I read in one of these books. I inhale books. So right now I'm reading, I think I have 15 books going at the same time. I'm just reading what I'm feeling called to, but it's like Quit Like a Woman, and just like also about the mind and how the mind works. And now I totally dropped my train of thought. But oh, yeah, how with alcohol. So say that at some point the tobacco you know industry shifted its narrative and started advertising to women. It's the same thing with alcohol. Now they're like expanding their market. Their newest, highest growing is the women. So it's just like, how, if alcohol would come on the market right now, like how many people would line up to get it? Number one. And also how we as women like we have to like step in and put our big girl pants on and be like, what do I do to my own safety? It's not my fault, but what do I do to my own safety if I go out and just, start drinking even one glass? You're shutting your brain down. And I just think I guess my point is that it's such a vicious, like the advertisement is so vicious. It's just like targeting, like that, but you have to drink to fit in. You have to, this is what the cool kids are doing. For moms, it's like the only thing that's going to get you through the day. uh well, like just what I'm just so present to is like, be aware. Like awareness is step number one. If we can see, this brainwashing for what it is, and just be like, I don't believe that anymore, I call bullshit on that. No, like I was addicted to smoking for 20 years. Like I couldn't even get out of house without having, like, I don't know how many cigarettes. And if I didn't bring my pack, I would panic, and I would plan my day along how I could smoke next. And then when the kids, even after I had kids, I smoked, and I would choose to like drive instead of walking because I couldn't smoke with them right there. But if they were in the car, it was fine. I could smoke and I could peek on them and they were fine. But I would like plan my whole day around when I could have my next fix. And the reason I started smoking in the first place at 15 was because it was cool, to fit in, to
Yeah.
not be this nerd or whatever, this person I have become. And it's just seeing past all the information that's coming to us. And even if you're not that addicted, that's also like, why even have one? Why have poison? Because that's not how it's sold to us.
It's sold as a solution, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To our own insecurities and inadequacies ultimately. And I remember having chicken pox when I was 12, and there was a Sunday colour supplement that had come with the Telegraph or the Times, and I love reading like you are. I'm a total bookworm. And I started to read, and there's some good articles in there, I remember, but I also became very aware of the number of big one-page advertisements. And being a bit of a girl nerd, I counted up how many there were and how many words of copy were in that particular magazine. And I was shocked. I'm like, there's all these people trying to sell me something. I just want to read the good stuff. My father he did me a lot of favors, but one of them was he kicked television out of my life when I was 8. So some of the whole advertising thing skipped me by. And to this day, actually, when I divorced 20 something years ago, I decided not to have a TV. So in a sense, my immunity was there, and it's built up pretty good and strong, because all of these things, they have an impact on your biochemistry. Your brain your subconscious, your unconscious can't tell the difference between this thing and that thing. It's no good saying, oh, it's just a story, it's just a dream. You've had an experience, and advertising knows that. I mean, the word target is pretty ugly, isn't it?
What is your target audience?
Line them up, you know. And the messages, I mean, in England, I don't know how it is in the States, but for the last few years, the messages have been Prosecco and chocolate. Now, I'd never heard of Prosecco, and I suspect it was pretty rare, but some clever bod, identified it as quite let's just call it a girly feminine type of drink, or could be marketed as such. I mean, it's just a bog standard Italian Prosecco, dry fizzy wine. But somebody must have sat up overnight and thought, how can we sell more of this? And again, what I come back to, it's people congregating around something because they want to connect with each other. They want that love and friendship and fun. And that gives them the ticket. For you and me, my friends, we don't actually congregate in that way. We'd like to get together with some candles, maybe some sage, do a bit of chanting, drumming, go for a walk together, have a cup of tea. That would be our congregation. But the connection is ultimately the heart, the whole technology of the heart. And what a lot of these biochemicals continue to do is to keep you from experiencing your nature. There's something denatured is being given to you. And the history of even those things comes back to forms, and like there are many, but forms of slavery, and creates forms of slavery. Because there's an ownership now. Your identity is in some way owned by being able to identify with, forgive me, girls, anybody who knows me, Prosecco and chocolate, or whatever it is. That's kind of how you end up defining yourself a little bit. People like you, people like me, people like the ones we're touching may have been in and out of those milieu. I have. I used to get cocktail Sobrani cigarettes, and I'd buy 4 or 5 packs and take out all the ones that would match the color of my outfit that night. So, I'm coming from a pretty experienced. I know what it's like to want, and it's, it was fun. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I think what I'm saying is it's helping to create environments where people can thrive without needing to over-identify with something outside themselves, but to feel valuable enough to just show up and loved enough.
I so get all that. And what I'm hearing too is that these connections, going out to the bar with your friends or going over to somebody's house, like we're vegan now. So like going to somebody's house sometimes can be a little bit challenging because I'm going to say no, and it's very uncomfortable. But if somebody serves meat, dairy, or eggs, I will not eat that because I feel so connected that, animals are just as spiritual and want to live and feel love as us. So that to me is not food anymore, but it's still just like being able to say no and turning that gift of love, which I feel like the connection, the gathering, all that is and just knowing that, first of all, I am enough, and I'm lovingly saying no to this, whatever it is. Just see it as like a piece of gum or something. No, thank you. I'm not saying you no to your heart, to your friendship, I'm just actually, by saying no to this thing that I know is no longer serving me, I'm saying yes to me so I can say yes to you. But that's not how it's perceived, like, do you see what I'm saying? It's just, there's so multi-tiered, especially and also being able to shift that way of being, which I felt like the gift of pregnancy gave me, was that how can I, be with my friends that is not surrounded by this way of eating or this way of drinking, like maybe creating walks that is beautiful, or going to the beach, or yoga, or for me, like more like daytime, between, like, maybe we could do something between 10 and 4 during the day. It doesn't have to be, meet at the pub at 10 p.m, stay up all night. It's no longer serving me, but I would love to spend time with you. But can we, do lunch? I know a new restaurant.
Yeah. Break the traditional patterns, and when you start doing that, a creative spiral comes in. And I've always felt that, for me, growing up in the household I did, for a long time, there was a solidity, a familiarity to it. It was 9 o'clock, my parents would go to the pub, hear the key go in the door, they'd lock us in, go out, come back at a certain time. I didn't like those when I was younger. I didn't like those times when they're out the house, but but then it became something they couldn't break out of, it seemed. Whereas to me, it was very boring. It became very boring after a while. And that's that repetition for me. And that's something in your spirit and my spirit that's like, you still want to do that every night. When I started to pull away and think, I'd like to go to the theatre. I want to see London. And the only way I could do those things was to go and do them on my own, at a youngish age, 17, 18, and start to explore the world, because I realized, without having a cognitive thought, that I remember that my parents weren't going to do that. Their lives had become their habitual pattern.
And also what I'm hearing too is that what we're playing with is very addictive substances. I mean, if it's alcohol or cigarettes or sugar. So it's like we have the society, habit, friendship, but that's where all my friends are. I mean, how else can I see them? But you're also, probably working through withdrawal from the alcohol that has that pull, So there's just so many tiers to it. And what's the best cure for a hangover? Probably to drink more.
That's what they used to say in England, hair of the dog.
Right.
Have a hair of the dog that bit you, old boy. Numb out the pain with the thing that numbs out the pain with the thing that numbs out the pain. I mean, that was all around me. That they were standard phrases, acceptable standard ways of being. And I've written about it. I'm just finishing my book called She Broke Free, and that's been revelatory, because it's in writing it, I thought, that was rape, that was alcoholism. I've kind of been hip to it, but it's like, no. And you said something earlier about, oh, don't ruin his life or something. I'm not out to ruin anybody's life, but I'm certainly not masking what happened or trotting around it nicely. No, he did that. I was a minor. Excuse me, somebody, if nobody else can speak up, I will. And that's his name. So tough.
Yeah, no, good for you. Good for you. Let's see if I can remember it. This is what somebody told me, because the person that hurt me so much was my grandfather, and I was on a podcast, and I had like the worst anxiety after it. I couldn't even remember what I had said. It was the first time I came out and talked about this, like the incest. And my friend said that if people don't want you to talk badly about them, they should stop doing shitty stuff.
Damn right. We've pussyfooted around the topic for so long, and shh, don't say anything. And there's been sexual abuse in my history and in my family's history, which again has got uncovered with a sort of slow scraping away of the externals. And it also impacted a friend of mine, and she said, oh, we mustn't say anything. I'm like, that is exactly the problem. And I think, I can't quote it precisely, but Brené Brown said, the three exponential things that help it shame grow exponentially, and one of them is secrecy. Secrecy, silence, and something else.
Yes.
If you douse the same amount of shame in love, it wouldn't be shame anymore. But give it the oxygen of secrecy, silence, and what she might have said, three things, and then it will grow exponentially.
Yes.
And I feel that we're in generations now, I'm in another one, and the women coming, who have found voice and are not, I don't want to make enemies of anyone. I'll be clear, my inside spiritual teachers, the ones that whisper in my ear, say, look, you've got to learn you're not making enemies of anybody, but you have to create environments you can thrive in. So in naming people where it's appropriate and relevant anyway, I'm not scared of doing that, because I haven't got an enemy attack behind it.
Yes.
But it is an appropriate and tangible part of my own story. And as you say, they stepped into my life in a particular way, with or without my consent, and they carry that with them. And this might be taking things a bit far for some people, but in naming them, I'm also forgiving them. I'm forgiving myself, because they have power over me when they're not named, and they're still also hiding behind, well, they might not be, but generally speaking, a mask of secrecy and shame themselves. And the only way we ever stop that is by bringing something to the light. And some people might say, well, you don't have the right. And what I'm like, well, I do actually, because there is a dynamic that exists, and the only way one of us, when two people are arguing, it's only somebody's got to stop it. And it isn't just about me, it's about every woman who we impact, who I impact, that I think just needs to be given exactly what you've given me, some reassurance. You're allowed to. He was happy to have his name attached to you, for XYZ. The rest goes with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I hear,
and if I add to that, no shame, no blame, then I'm not saying you should be ashamed of yourself or you should be blamed. I genuinely am not, because my book has become a pilgrimage of total ownership of my life. But I am saying that when a thing has a name, it's no longer invisible.
And when you see the shapes of it and just see the contours, you can also maybe see that it's not as scary as it seemed in the shadows.
That's so true.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I know for my own healing that I needed to dig deep, find out more. By the time I remember what had happened, my grandfather had passed away, but there were criminal records, because he actually did end up spending time in jail because he had abused other people. So in just over this last year, I did find those court documents. I got to hear his voice almost like from the dead. And he was so sick. He was hurting. It comes up, had probably happened to him from his own father. Like it was a disease. Like he didn't feel like he could abstain from what the words that he was calling it, like the can't find the word, but it was like an addiction. He didn't feel like he could say no to temptation. He thought it was a temptation. That he just wasn't powerful enough to say no to. And just being able to hear this and just doing this research, naming, seeing the problem for what it is, I have been able to do so much forgiveness and just letting go and just understanding and just being like, I'm so sorry. It must have been so hard being you. Like he said that his plan was, because he knew that what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't stop it. And his solution was that if it came out, he was going to commit suicide. And he tried to do that as well. He was not successful. But talk about like being, that boat alone and just feeling that there's no way out but death.
Oh, you're a very brave woman.
So are you. It takes one to know one. Yeah. And I know that anybody who's watching this and can hear what we're talking about, just knowing that they're not alone. Their ship is not out at sea. Just turning that light on and you can see that right there there's somebody else and over there. And
Yes, that's true.
so beautiful. I can't wait to read your book. Tell us more. When is it coming out?
I'm in the final edit at the moment, she said, and I've been saying that for 2 months. But Christmas is coming, which is a time of, spaciousness for me. So big decisions are going to be made in the new year about getting it published. The theme, interesting enough, coming back to addictions, the underlying theme, the lens through which I started to look, is about possession and what or whom possesses you. And, for me, that's become a journey into possessing myself so that I am available for my spirit in totality.
That's so beautiful. What are some tips that you could give somebody that's like listening to this and know they're struggling but don't really know how to get started? What would you tell that person?
They don't know how to get started. I'd say the first thing is to look at what you do every day, because it's like your lived experience is a clue, and how you actually genuinely feel. And if you don't know how you feel, if you go into your head or you're thinking or you're saying everything's okay, just pause, pick up a journal, write as though nobody was ever going to read it, and put the truth in there. And don't try and dress it up or protect anyone. You don't have to do anything at this point, but I'd say if you don't know where to start, just sit down at the end of a day or 2 days and ask, how's it really been? How have I felt? Have I done the things that light me up? Could I have done? Have I done things because I should? Or I feel other people's needs are way more important than mine? Where am I in this equation of my life? Really? And no stuff about, well, the kids and the this, that, just where am I? And I just start there. And once you've kind of got a little bit familiar with that, you might reach out. Every choice is valid. You might make a decision for yourself. I need another half hour for myself, so I can just sit in the garden. And very often I say to women, you need to protect your time and space in a mindful way. There's an endocrine element to it, there's all sorts. And yes, we're all busy and we all have calls on our time. But within that, if you're not protecting that, everybody and everything else will be drawing on your energy. And that's when you might find that you need that couple of glasses of wine at 6 o'clock because you've got nothing left. And then it all starts. What happens is it gets repetitive, doesn't it? You manage to get through dinner, you get the kids to bed, you crash, you wake up, you repeat. So there is that sort of sense of tracking your behavior, food, rinse. If you're rinsing and repeating your life, then to me, that's an indication there's a sort of a flatlining going on.
I love that. It's really great advice.
Thank you.
I've kind of been doing that a little bit right now. I started keeping a food journal. And then after each thing that I eat, I just write how I feel, how my body feels. Because that's something that, yeah, it's just such a habit, right?
When I fasted, I used to fast for quite long periods as a yogic teacher. And the first time I fasted for 3 days, I used to make a note of what I was feeling before I went to get some food, which wasn't there because I was fasting, right? So I was like, I couldn't jump the crevice into the fridge because I'd be halfway across and go, oh, what am I thinking or feeling right now? And sometimes it's genuine, I'm just hungry, and sometimes it's, for me, it's a stuffing down, reaching out to put something in my mouth because I've just had an uncomfortable thought.
Yeah.
And once you can start catching your thoughts, then you can get down to feeling level. So abstaining from something, if you can for a little while, that you normally do in safety is incredibly revealing if you're willing to not go and push something else into the hole, not go and binge watch on Netflix. And it's just like you're going to sit with yourself for a bit, which is why journaling's so good.
Oh, that's amazing. I could seriously talk to you all day, but I think that we should probably finish here and then maybe we can, pick this up at a different time. But I want to be mindful of your time and oh my goodness. Thank you so much. How can people find you?
Website is a good starting place. My name is Debs de Vries, the same as my website. So it's the 3 W's and the dot. And it's DEBS for sugar, V for Victor, R Romeo, I India, E Echo, and S Sierra, debsdevries.com. There's the usual sort of links on there. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got the usual sort of modern stuff going on, but that would be a good place to start.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. So much.
Oh, with such pleasure. I'm such a huge advocate of where you are, what you're doing, and the space you're opening up. So anything I can do to support, you only have to ask.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you.